What is up, everyone? My name is Michael Pohl with Bay Area Aquatics, and today we're going to be going over the top 5 tank mates for your betta fish. Alright, so just as a kind of starting out forewarning, if you have like a betta fish in a bowl or a very small tank, I would not put anything else with it. I personally don't like to put betta fish in anything smaller than a 5-gallon, and if you're going to do tank mates, you really need to get like a 10-gallon or bigger. Some of these you could kind of squeeze into a 5-gallon if you're real diligent on water changes, but if you're new and not quite sure about stocking levels, I would recommend going with at least a 10-gallon, and then once you kind of figure out what you can handle, how often you can water change, then maybe you can start looking into thinking of smaller aquariums. But I like to put betta fish with pairs, or not pairs of betta fish, but betta fish with tank mates in nothing smaller than a 10-gallon, if not bigger. That being said, even in a 10-gallon, there are quite a few really cool tank mates you can add to your tank to give it just that extra bit of layer of depth and a little bit of extra characteristic and some extra wildlife in your aquarium. The very first one I'm going to recommend would be pygmy cories. Now, pygmy cories are really cute. They stay very small, like an inch or smaller. When you get them, they're probably going to be even smaller than that because they're going to be relatively young, and they don't grow very large. So you could easily do a school of like 6 to 10 of them in a 10-gallon, maybe even like a dozen of them, again, depending on what your water change situation is. They're very cool little fish. They're very cute. They like to hang out in groups. They swim both mid-water and at the bottom. They hang out at the bottom quite a lot, but when they swim, they like to be kind of in the middle of the water. The second tank bait I'm going to recommend is coolie loaches. Now, coolie loaches are one of the fish that I never really liked when I first started out in the hobby. I thought they were just weird and wasn't a big fan of them. And then I actually got some, and I still keep coolie loaches to this day because I actually really like them. They're a fish you're not going to see all that often. They like to hide during the day. They're very nocturnal. So you'll see them a lot if you're in an area where like your fish tank lights turn off, but you're still walking by it every now and then. You'll definitely see them then. They like to move around a lot at night. Again, they're a bottom dweller. They look kind of like a little worm. They're brown with white stripes, but you can get different types of coolie loaches. They're relatively easy to find. I've even seen them at like PetSmart and Petco versus some of the other oddball stuff, but most people that I talk to never keep them because they're either odd, or when they're at the fish store, they don't quite see them in the fish tank. They don't realize that they're there. But they're a really cool fish to kind of be like, oh look, I just saw it. And it's kind of one of those like, kind of like a plecostomus. Like, you don't always see it, but when you do, it's a nice little treat. Like I said, these guys are going to hang out along the bottom of your tank. You will very rarely see them up in the upper water. They do occasionally, especially at nighttime, but they're pretty much going to be laying down on the bottom. And you're going to want to make sure you have plenty of hiding spots, plants, whatever for them. Same with pygmy cories, same with pretty much most of these fish actually, because you want to be able to make sure they can get away from the betta fish if the betta fish tries to go after it too fast. But really fun fish, another bottom dweller. Now, with the coolie loaches and the pygmy cories, while they are a bottom dweller fish, you are going to want to target feed them. I know that's kind of something that gets out there a lot, as people are like, oh, well, they're on the bottom, they live off of scraps and fish poop. And that's not necessarily true. Actually, that's not true at all. You're going to want to target feed them. You're going to want to get some sinking pellets or something like that, or feed very heavily on the flakes, which can cause other problems. So again, I recommend a sinking food. That way they can eat. Your coolie loaches don't like to eat during the day very much, so I usually like to feed mine like 5 or 10 minutes before the lights go out, and then they start to kind of come out and eat the food before it starts to get too nasty and all in the water. Now, my next favorite tank mate, and this one's kind of iffy, but this is what I personally keep with my betta fish. I also kept my last betta fish with these guys, and it's just my favorite combination, and that's going to be cherry shrimp. Cherry shrimp are a bottom dweller, and they are definitely a little bit on the expensive side as far as fish, but if you get them from a hobbyist, they're usually pretty decently priced. But if you buy them from a fish store, you're going to be spending $4 or $5 per shrimp, and these are ones that are, again, may or may not work with your betta fish. If you do cherry shrimp, you're going to want a lot of hiding spots because some betta fish will hunt them. Your longer fin varieties, some might, but I found mine was just way too lazy didn't like going after them, and they still bred like crazy in my tank. But my short fin plakat betta fish that I currently have likes to go hunting after them. And so I will occasionally see a full-size cherry shrimp in his mouth, and it's a nice little $4 or $5 snack for him. But luckily I have other tanks that I breed them in, so it's not a breeding tank for me. But if you don't have an established colony, you might want to avoid this one if you have a short finned or a very active betta fish. I found the best way to do the cherry shrimp with the betta fish is do the cherry shrimp first, let them establish, let them grow, let them multiply, and get a good colony of cherry shrimp going, and then introduce the betta fish. But even then, my plakat wiped out the population down to just a handful pretty quickly. He hasn't been able to fully kill off the population, but it's definitely a lot smaller than it was. Now, my fourth pick for a betta fish tank mate is going to be some sort of snail. Now, I personally have pest snails in all of my tank. That's what they're known by. Things like pond snails, Malaysian trumpet snails. I can't think of the other names, but there's a handful of different types that are very common. I personally like those in my tank. They're very beneficial to the ecosystem. And as long as you don't overfeed crazy, you can usually keep the population pretty in check. But a lot of people are not fans of them because the population can get out of control very quickly if you overfeed. So that's the one thing I'd be cautious of. If you get something like a mystery snail, that's a lot more of a pet snail. They do breed in freshwater. Nerite snails won't breed in freshwater. Mystery snails are very popular. You can get them in a lot of colors, from yellows to blues to purple to just other ones as well. They're very large, they're very animated, and they're very fun to watch. One of the things you're going to want to watch if you have like a mystery snail is you're going to want to make sure that you're, again, target feeding the snail. They are a cleanup crew, they are bottom dwellers, but they also need to be target fed. And so you're going to want to get some either sinking pellets or some snail specific food. You can make things like Snello, which is a snail based food for made out of like a gelatin mix, and you mix some things into that. You really have to watch their calcium intake because their shells can deteriorate if there's not enough calcium in the water or in their diet. So you don't want to feed them just the algae in the tank. Don't want to feed them just scraps. You definitely want to target feed them and make sure that they stay healthy and alive. And finally, the fifth pick is going to be one that's going to be not controversial, but a little oddball. They tend to be a colder water fish. That being said, I keep them in an 80-degree tank right now, and they breed and do great. I've had them in ponds that get up to as high as 88, 89 degrees, and they've done fine. I wouldn't recommend keeping them that high, but in the summertime. And they also do well very low. But you're going to want to keep them around 78, 80 degrees with your betta fish, and that's going to be white cloud mountain minnows. Now, these are a really cool fish. They're going to stay in the middle of the water. They're not a bottom dweller. You're still going to want to feed them, target feed them, just because, again, they're not going to eat the betta food, but they will eat flakes and things like that. The thing I like about white cloud minnows is they're a very underrated fish. They're popular in the YouTube community just because of the fact they're underrated, but they're relatively cheap. You can get them for like $2 a piece, if not cheaper at a fish store usually. At least my local fish store, I want to say they're like $1.25 a piece, $2. They're really cheap. And they look really cool, and they're a fish that not a lot of hobbyists keep. But that being said, they have a really pretty color, but they're also not super bright and super like in your face. So they're going to make sure that your betta fish stays the center of attention, but it's still going to be a nice, good looking fish to be able to add some movement to the tank. They're going to be swimming back and forth all day. They might swim around with your betta fish. It'll give them some activity to do, or her an activity to do, if chase them around a little bit. And I just really like them as a betta tank mate, and I've kept my bettas with white cloud minnows on numerous occasions. So like I said, those are my top 5 favorite pairings and take mates for a betta fish. Let me know in the comments what you keep with your betta fish. I'm always curious what type of pairings people do, because some betta fish work with some pairings and other ones don't work with other pairings. So you never really know, but these ones I have found to work with all of the bettas I've tried them with. And I know other people that have tried these combinations and they've worked pretty successfully with them. You always get that oddball betta that's like, doesn't like anyone, needs its own tank, whatever it is, but that's not as common as people make it out to be. So yeah, like I said, let me know in the comments down below what you keep with your betta fish. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell notification so you get notified every time I upload a video. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, you know what to do. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.